When I was fresh out of college and looking for a room to rent, I looked to Craigslist. After not finding much of anything I could afford, I found one place that seemed near perfect. A room with utilities paid in a fairly nice for $300 a month. Most places of the same quality were going for around $500, so this was an awesome deal. I agreed to meet first, and the girl who lived there was 20, and her name was Jay. During our conversation, there was this underlying darkness to her stories. She mentioned how she had been through some tough times and was looking for a fresh start. Seemed like a decent person, although a bit odd, but nothing out of the ordinary. Upon moving in, things seemed all right at first. My roommate was indeed friendly and approachable, and we even hit it off as friends. However, as the days turned into weeks, I started noticing odd things around the house. Random objects would go missing, especially the kitchen knife, and only to reappear in different places days later. I always cook, so I remember where I put the knife. One night around 1 a.m. I woke up when I hear chairs moving. After that, the sound of sweeping, like someone was sweeping with a broom. Then the sound of someone softly singing in the hallway. I thought maybe it was just the TV left on. I came out of my bedroom. All the lights were off. But as I got closer, I realized it was Jay standing there in the dark, singing some weird nursery rhyme. I couldn't see her face, just her silhouette swaying back and forth. I noped out of there and hid in my room until morning. She would often be awake at 1 or 2 a.m. making weird sounds through the house, and walk down the hallway towards my door and stand there. When I'd ask her in the morning, she'd play it off as sleepwalking. One day I came home from work early to pick something I'd forgotten, only to find she rearranging all my stuff in my room. She claimed she was just helping me organize, but I knew better. Who the heck does that without permission? Everything became more and more odd when I noticed a smell coming from her room. It was a mix of rotting food. It was harsh and metallic, the smell of something that shouldn't be there. I walked out the house as quietly as I could, instantly understanding that something was wrong. I could sense it. I made my way silently down the hall, pausing once I was outside. I was starting to feel afraid, in a way that made me feel uncomfortable, as if I was going to be attacked. I hesitated, but finally when I asked her about it, she laughed it off. But the laughter didn't reach the eyes. She brushed it off as spoiled groceries, and promised to clean up. But after this went on for a few more weeks, I got freaked out enough, so while she was out, I decided to peek to her room. What I found shook me to the core. It was an absolute mess, and the source of the foul smell was a pile of decaying food, mixed with what looked like meat was scattered along a trail that ended with a bowl. The room was splattered with blood around the walls. There wasn't anywhere I looked where there wasn't murky red drenched over. The room filled with all sorts of creepy stuff like old dolls, rusty knives, and faded photographs of people I didn't recognize. I screaming as the horror set into me. I couldn't believe my eyes. Unsure of what to do, I called my close friend and told her about what I saw. She urged me to be cautious, or even consider moving out. I want to talk to Jay about this. I usually outspoken and have fearless nature, so if something is not right, I will honest. But at this point, I'm not sure. What if she turned violent or did something to me? Also, I don't have a place to go, and my close friend is out of town for a few days, so I have no other choice, and as my busy schedule meant most of the time I'm not home. As the days went on, the house became increasingly tense and uncomfortable. Her behavior became unpredictable. She'd lock herself in her room for days, and when she did come out, she seemed to have this unsettling glare in her eyes, as if she was hiding some secret. One night my eyes opened without me realizing I was up. It was still dark outside, and I couldn't understand why my sleep had been broken. I realized why in the next moment. I heard what sounded like my door being unlocked, and as the door slowly opened, steps walked towards my bed, and there was the sound of breathing next to my face. In the darkness, I could see the faint outline of a person and know that was Jay, and she just standing there watching me sleep. I didn't react. Scared Jay might get violent if I tried to move. I was super freaked out, it felt like forever, but she stayed there for only 5 minutes, and left my room and locked the door. I think Jay has a key and can enter my room whenever she wants. I didn't sleep that night. I picked up a bat I kept for precaution and waited in my room in case she entered my room again. And in the morning, I couldn't take it any longer, and I mustered the courage to confront her about the disturbing things I had found in her room, and bout she went into my room in the middle of the night. Her response gave me chills. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You don't understand what it's like to feel so empty inside. I just need something to fill the void." That was a big game changer. Suddenly I had no idea what she was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly disturbing. That was it for me. I knew I had to get out of there, no matter the cost. I quickly packed everything, and made arrangements to stay with my friend until I could find a new place. To this day, I'm not sure the secrets she was hiding. I still wonder what actually happened to her life. But I'm glad I got out of there before things got even creepier. It all happened a few years ago when I was on the hunt for a used laptop. Being the budget-conscious person that I am, I use Craigslist for the best deal I could find. I desperately need laptop. So I found an ad on Craigslist, a guy selling his laptop cheaper $200 than everyone else's ads. I give the guy a call, and he tells me that he has no need for the laptop now, since he seemed to have a fairly straight story, or at least it sounded that way. So I agreed to meet up with him at a secluded park on the outskirts of town. Meeting at a public place might have been a better idea, but I was too excited about the prospect of scoring a good deal to think it through. It was 9 p.m. As I drove up to the park, I noticed that it was empty. There were no other cars, no kids playing, nothing. Ignoring the feeling, I parked, and I walked over to the swing set, smoking cigarettes and waited for him to show up. Honestly, it kinda creepy sitting at the park alone. I was sitting on the swing, pushing back and forth in a boredom. Also very cold tonight, maybe because of the wind, or probably the fact of me being alone at the park. After 1 hour and what felt like an eternity, a figure come from the bushes and from the shadows. I immediately knew it was him. He seemed about 23 or 24, which was around my age. He just seemed kinda off. He had this unsettling aura about him, and he kept fidgeting with a tattered backpack, just staring at me, grinning the entire time, which creeped me out and already made me feel uneasy about the situation. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream, but I was already there, and I didn't want to be rude, so against my better judgment, I greeted him with a shaky smile. I know some people are just awkward, so I tried to shrug it off. He led me to a secluded bench away from the main path, and that's when things took a bizarre turn. He started asking personal questions that had nothing to do with the laptop, like where I lived, what my schedule was like, and if I lived alone. Red flags were going off in my head like fireworks on the 4th of July. I tried to steer the conversation back to the laptop, but he seemed disinterested in talking about it. Instead, he kept fixating on me and my personal life, which made my skin crawl. It felt like he was sizing me up or something, like he had different intentions. When I finally managed to bring up the laptop again, he handed it to me, and it looked worse than I expected. Scratched, beaten up, and probably not even worth the price. As I was inspecting it, he leaned in uncomfortably close, his eyes now filled with an intensity that gave me chills. He started speaking in a low, hushed voice and said, "Don't afraid, I promise I won't hurt you." And that's when I decided I'd had enough. I knew something wasn't right, and decided to get out of there as fast as possible. I'm making up some excuse telling him I'm gonna grab my cash, so I started to walk back to my car. I figured I was good to go now, and could get the hell out of there. When I was far enough away, I ran for it. That runaway back to my car itself was the one of most horrific experiences of my life, because I had the constant fear of somebody chasing me in the back of my mind. As soon as I reach my car and pause for a breather, I hear what sounded like a metal hitting not far from me, and saw that guy emerge from the trees and holding a crowbar. For a split second, he and I stared at each other, before he opened his mouth and let an insane cackling noise leave his lungs. He stared at me with those wide, bloodshot eyes and running towards my car. I turned the key in the ignition and practically threw the car in drive before it was even fully started. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I barely successfully escaped a dangerous situation. I was far too traumatized and promised to myself no more Craigslist. A few days later, I saw a news report about a guy who was arrested for luring people to secluded spots through Craigslist and robbing them at knife point. I got goosebumps all over my arms. The guy on the news looked just like him. I immediately reported my encounter to the police, and they told me that they had been on his trail for a while. It turns out, he had a history of preying on unsuspecting Craigslist buyers. I felt both relieved and terrified that I had avoided becoming one of his victims. Seriously, there are some real creeps out there. Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was looking for her first apartment and moving out from her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move in together since they had only dated for a few months. So she searched for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled something like, "Roommate Wanted, Females Only." This sort of thing was common since the area she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to the most places listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student that wasn't comfortable with living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there is a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. When she knocks on the back door and an older man opens the door. At first, Amanda thinks she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant was out and he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off but aren't at red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. No furniture. Nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions but seemed irritable to keeping lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord wouldn't open, telling her that it was the occupant's room, and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walk down the hallway into the living room, she notices the front door has a plank nailed across it. Amanda decides to wrap up the walkthrough and leave, but trying to polite. As she's giving the guy her thanks for the showing, he perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement. It's recently furnished, and she should take a look down there. At the time, Amanda and the man are standing in the small hallway between the front living room and the back kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward to create something of a barrier between Amanda and the back door. The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs and says, "Ladies first." What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda gets a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers her phone. "Hey, are you here? I'll come out from around back and let you in. It's great, you have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself around the landlord and walks out of the back door. She says the guy just looked at her like he was confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mother and my brother everything. Cops were called, they took her statement and went to investigate. The Craigslist post had been removed.